Well guys, the 51P PDWR is back from PTR Industries. After the last video, I was trying to figure out what was wrong with it, doing some sleuthing, and all indications pointed to a problem with the locking piece. So the angle of the shoulder on the locking piece controls how quickly the bolt unlocks, or well, how much delay there is, because it's not a true locked action. And there's different locking pieces that are designed to be used with different barrel lengths and different calibers. So almost all of the parts are interchangeable between the 308 versions, the 5.56 versions, and the 9mm versions, although obviously you wouldn't necessarily want to interchange the locking pieces. So when I pulled the one out of this, it had a 70-degree locking piece shoulder, and I asked a friend of mine who has one of these. He pulled one out of his, and his was a 55-degree. Now, the 55-degree locking piece is also called a number 7 locking piece, so I'm wondering if that was perhaps the source of the issue. Somebody, while building this gun, had a Friday moment. They were reaching for a number 7 when they accidentally grabbed a 70. So essentially, the 70-degree locking piece, I believe, is for a standard barrel length MP5. So it's a locking piece designed for a 9mm being used in a 308. So this thing was pretty close to just being a straight blowback 308. Which explains why we were getting such a severe case of roller dent, explains why it battered the buffer into a nice U shape, probably explains why it broke the hammer, probably explains why it broke a buffer tube, probably even explains why the gun was never particularly reliable. Anyway, so contacted PTR, and they took the gun back, they evaluated it, they said that it could not be repaired, and so they replaced it. What they replaced on this was essentially the upper, which is the serialized part of this gun. They sent me back my same trigger pack, with a replacement hammer. They actually took the HK Parts USA-made hammer that I put in there out, put one of their hammers back in. They did send me the spare part, which is nice. So this is now basically back to its factory configuration. So this also has a replacement end cap and recoil assembly. This is the end cap assembly that comes on it. This is basically a little short dummy buffer tube that's got a sling swivel in it, and it's got a castle nut and a locking plate to hold it into their custom end plate adapter here. So if I wanted to, I could reconfigure this the same way that I had it. Basically take off this sling swivel, which is screwed into the back of the recoil buffer, which free floats in here. So the process would be to take that out, take off the castle nut, remove the locking plate, then unscrew this little dummy buffer tube, reassemble it with a pistol buffer tube and the SOB brace like I had it before. I'm probably not going to do that. I'm probably going to keep the gun in this configuration, because what I'm most likely going to do is sell it. Yeah, the original gun had some serious problems. This one, however, seems to be working just fine. I brought it out today to do some chronograph testing, as well as some function testing. Put a couple mags through it, and it is working flawlessly. It feels better than before. I mean, it's very subjective because I'm not shooting it with a brace, and also it's been probably a couple months since I shot the original one. It does feel better, so I'm hoping that they tamed the recoil cycle. I did put my obnoxious muzzle brake back on there, just because that's the way that I'm used to shooting it, and it looks cool, and it's really fun. So the results of the chronograph testing are kind of fascinating. I put this up against my 7.5-inch barreled 300 Blackout pistol. Both of them I was shooting Wolf steel case. So the 300 Blackout Wolf supersonic ammunition is 145 grain supersonic, and then the Wolf 308 is also 145 grain. Most likely, I'm going to say, uses the exact same projectile. And 7.5-inch 300 Blackout was hovering around 1,600 feet per second. And the 8-inch barreled 308 was getting around 1,800 feet per second. That's a reasonable increase in muzzle velocity, jumping from 300 Blackout to 308, but it's really not very good. So is there a practical use for this? Oh, of course not. For starters, this is the configuration without a brace. You basically have a sling attached to the rear, and then you've got the standard HK hook attachment up at the front. So you can run a sling on this thing. It actually points pretty well, shoots pretty well from a sling. You can get your eyes behind the sight pretty well. This is kind of, a buddy of mine calls this the Embassy Raider configuration, and it is kind of fun to shoot that way. I don't know how, actually I do know how practical it is. It's not practical at all, and clearly you're sacrificing pretty much all of the performance of full house 308 loads by shooting them through an 8-inch barrel. However, this is still a really, really cool gun. I probably am going to just sell this. I think I could probably use something a little more practical. Either a PTR 9KT, so one of their MP5K clones, that could be kind of fun. or perhaps a full-size 308 rifle, probably an AR-10 configuration. So if you guys have any thoughts about what I should replace this with, go ahead and let me know in the comments. If you have any questions about the ownership experience or the troubleshooting experience of the 51P PDWR, let me know as well. I have complained a bit about dealing with PTR. I don't think they're necessarily the most responsive company in the world, but they did take care of me in the end here, so I really appreciate that. And yeah, I've had a lot of fun with this thing, and now I think it's time to let it ride off into the sunset. Alright, see you guys later. Fucking works, man.